The death of Julius Caesar is one of history's greatest what-ifs. Historians have theorized all the many ways that Rome, and by extension the world, would have been different had he not been slain. With the untimely death of a leader, there are always theorized events and what-ifs. Most of the time, this is all speculation. But in the case of Julius Caesar, we know exactly what would have happened in the event that he had not been assassinated by the Roman Senate. Julius Caesar had been planning his next great conquest once he had returned to Rome. His political situation was tenuous at best. While Caesar was able to place his allies in key places in the Senate and the government, he still faced stiff resistance from the remaining holdouts in the Senate. Indeed, Caesar's greatest asset to holding on to power was his military might and the support of the people. Caesar's reforms to the government were popular with both subsets of the population, but they were looking for more. In truth, the Roman people wanted more wealth from trade, the soldiers wanted more wealth from conquest, and Caesar wanted more glory. It has long been thought that the Roman Senate was going to bestow the title of king upon Caesar right before he left on his next great conquest. This would have received a mixed reaction, and Caesar would have wanted to look legitimate. The best way in the Roman world to be seen as a legitimate ruler was through expansion. In his mind, there was one area that Rome could expand, and that was to the east. 3 days before Caesar could have left on his campaign, he was assassinated by his enemies in the Senate, and a new Roman civil war commenced. Today, we are lucky. We know, or at least have a decent idea, of what Caesar's eastern campaign would have looked like. By the time of his death, Caesar had sent Octavius with 6 legions and substantial funding to Apollonia in Macedonia to begin training and recruitment. By the time he had arrived, he was hoping to be able to launch an invasion into the kingdom of Dacia to the north. At this time, Dacia was ruled by the king Burebista. The kingdom was formidable enough that Caesar viewed them as a threat to Roman rule in the east and planned on taking them out first. After securing his flank, Caesar then planned on launching an attack into Parthia to avenge Crassus's defeat several years earlier. By this time, Caesar's 6 legions would have been reinforced by 10 additional ones. Caesar was determined to not make the same mistake as his predecessor Crassus, and planned on using his cavalry to defend his large mass of soldiers, but also to scout until he knew the full strength of the Parthian military. Once all of this was figured out, Caesar would pick his battlefield and fight in the place of his choosing. In total, Caesar would have had around 60,000 heavy infantry concentrated into 16 legions, 10,000 cavalrymen, and many other thousands of light infantry and skirmishers. This would have been quite a formidable invasion force. Here, though, is where historians diverge on his goals. The historian Suetonius wrote that Caesar's campaign into Parthia was going to be one of caution and strategy. The Roman army would invade Parthia through the allied kingdom of Armenia, and then proceed to fight the Parthian army in Parthia proper. They would stick close to the rivers and make it extremely difficult for the Parthian cavalry to hit them, like they did to Crassus many years earlier. After the conquest was done, Caesar would return back to Rome to organize his new lands, and would be instated as king. Plutarch has a different view. He writes that Caesar would invade Parthia, but then would have proceeded to march north through the Caucasus Mountains and attack Scythia. The Scythian tribes were nomadic people, but there were Greek colonies in and around the Black Sea coast, like on the island of Crimea, that would have been targets for the campaign in order to reinforce them and connect them to the Roman world through a land corridor. It is not impossible to understand why the Romans would have wanted to capture larger cities in the steppe, since that is where so much grain could have been grown, and the Black Sea coast would have provided many other advantages in terms of trade. After the conquest of parts of Scythia, The Roman army would have then marched west into Germania. Caesar would fight his way through the middle of Germania and then march down back to Italy. Ideally, through all of this, Caesar would be receiving reinforcements and support from Italy. By the end of his conquests, Caesar would have been able to celebrate triumphs and flaunt his new power as the king of Rome and over a massive new empire. Obviously, this never happened. Julius Caesar died on the floor of the theater of Pompey beneath the statue of the man who he had marked his rival. While Caesar died on the Ides of March, his ambitions did not. Later on, the Roman Emperor Trajan did exactly what Caesar wanted to do, and not only conquered Dacia, but also parts of western Parthia, pushing Rome to its greatest extent. It is an interesting thing to think about. If Caesar had been able to accomplish his goal, the Roman world, and quite possibly the entire course of world history, may have been changed. A Roman Empire that contained most of western Parthia, parts of the steppe land of Scythia, and nearly all of Germania, would have been an even more formidable opponent to any of the tribes that would later invade the Roman world. Alas, these possibilities, like so many others, exist only in our imaginations.